Your grandmother never did a big weekly shop. She never stood in a Tesco car park on a Sunday afternoon, loading 12 carrier bags into the boot. Yet somehow her cupboards were never bare. Open her pantry door in 1955, and you would find enough to feed the family for a fortnight without leaving the house. No meal kits, no Ocado deliveries, no panic buying. She had a system passed down through rationing, depression, and 2 world wars. And it worked better than anything we do today. These are the 30 old British habits that kept a pantry full, a family fed, and a household running on a fraction of what we spend now. Before we begin, subscribe. Number 14 on this list is something supermarkets pray you never learn again. Number 30. The stockpot that never stopped. Every kitchen had a heavy pot sitting on the back of the range, simmering quietly from Monday to Saturday. Chicken carcasses, beef bones, vegetable peelings, onion skins, carrot tops, everything went in. Your grandmother never threw away a bone. She dropped it into that pot with a bay leaf and a pinch of salt, topped up the water, and let time do the work. By Wednesday, the liquid had turned deep amber, rich with gelatin and flavor. She would ladle off what she needed for soup or gravy and keep feeding the pot. A whole week of flavor from scraps that would go straight in your bin today. The stockpot cost nothing to run on an Aga or range that was already burning. When central heating replaced the kitchen range in the 1960s, the perpetual stockpot disappeared almost overnight, and with it went free, nourishing broth on demand. Number 29. Buying flour by the stone. Your grandmother did not buy a 1-kilogram bag of flour from the baking aisle. She bought a stone at a time, 14 pounds, and stored it in a large ceramic crock with a tight-fitting lid in the cool of the larder. Flour was the backbone of everything. Bread, pastry, dumplings, thickening for stews, coating for fish. A stone cost about 2 shillings and sixpence in 1954, far cheaper per pound than the small bags we buy now. She would scoop out what she needed with a tin cup, and that crock would last a month. The ceramic kept weevils out and moisture away. Buying in bulk meant she never ran short, never made an emergency trip to the shops for a bag of self-raising. When smaller kitchens replaced larders in the 1970s, the flour crock vanished. We started buying tiny bags at 4 times the price and running out mid-recipe. Number 28. The baking day. On Wednesday or Thursday, every household had one fixed day for baking. Your grandmother would rise early, light the oven, and spend the morning producing everything the family needed for the week. 2 loaves of bread, a batch of scones, a Victoria sponge or fruit cake, perhaps a meat pie for Saturday tea. All done in one session, using one heating of the oven, saving fuel and time. The kitchen would fill with the smell of yeast and warm butter. Children came home from school to cooling racks lined with buns. By evening, the bread bin was full, the cake tin stocked, and the biscuit barrel topped up. Nothing was bought from a shop that could be made at home. A single baking day produced what would cost 5 or 6 pounds at the baker's for a fraction of the price. The habit died when sliced bread became cheap and women entered the workforce in greater numbers. But the principle was sound. One focused effort, a full week of provisions. Number 27th. Keeping a dry goods rotation. Rice, lentils, split peas, pearl barley, oats, sugar, and tea. Your grandmother kept all of these in labeled jars or tins on the pantry shelf, and she rotated them. New stock went to the back. Old stock came to the front. Nothing sat long enough to go stale or attract mice. She knew exactly what she had because she could see it. No rummaging through carrier bags stuffed in a cupboard. Shops were not open on Sundays or bank holidays. Running out of sugar on a Saturday evening meant no pudding until Monday. The rotation system was insurance against every inconvenience. It cost nothing to implement. It required only discipline and a row of clean jars. We replaced it with overstuffed cupboards and a weekly shop that ignores what we already have. Number 26. Growing herbs on the windowsill. Parsley, mint, chives, thyme. 4 pots on the kitchen windowsill provided fresh seasoning year-round. Your grandmother did not buy a plastic packet of herbs from Sainsbury's for £1.50, watch them wilt in 2 days, then throw them away. She snipped what she needed from living plants that cost pennies to grow and lasted for months. Parsley went into sauces, soups, fish, potatoes. Mint was for lamb and peas. A single packet of seeds costing 6p could keep a windowsill stocked for an entire year. It eliminated a recurring expense entirely. Modern supermarkets sell cut herbs in plastic packaging at an enormous markup, designed to perish quickly so you buy more. Your grandmother's windowsill was a standing rebellion against that whole business model. Number 25. The twice-cooked joint. A joint of beef or pork was never a single meal. It was a 3-day project. Sunday, it was roasted and served hot with vegetables and gravy. Monday, the cold meat was sliced thin for sandwiches, or served with bubble and squeak. Tuesday, the bone went into the stockpot, and any remaining scraps were minced for rissoles or shepherd's pie. 3 meals from one purchase. A joint costing 5 shillings in 1956 fed a family of 5 for half the week. Your grandmother planned this before she even bought the meat. She knew exactly how many meals that joint would yield. The dripping was saved for cooking. The jelly from the bottom of the meat plate went into gravy. We buy a Sunday roast now and throw away enough leftovers to make 2 more dinners. She would have been horrified. Number 24. Pickling and preserving in autumn. When the allotment produced more than the family could eat, your grandmother did not let it rot. She pickled, preserved, and bottled everything. Beetroot in vinegar, piccalilli from green tomatoes, chutney from windfall apples, runner beans salted in large stoneware crocks, jams from every fruit that ripened. By October, the pantry shelves would be lined with Kilner jars, each one labeled in neat handwriting with the date and contents. Those jars carried the household through winter. When fresh vegetables were expensive or unavailable, the preserves kept the table interesting. A jar of homemade chutney turned plain cheese on toast into a proper tea. The Women's Institute held preserving competitions that drew entries from every village. This was not a hobby. It was a survival strategy dressed up as domesticity. Number 23. Keeping a pudding tin stocked. The cake tin was never empty. The biscuit barrel was never bare. Your grandmother maintained a rolling supply of baked goods that meant something sweet was always available without a trip to the shops. When one cake was half eaten, she planned the next. When the biscuit tin ran low, she baked another batch on Wednesday. This was not indulgence, it was household management. Unexpected visitors were common. The vicar might call. A neighbor might need cheering up. Children came home hungry from school. Having something to offer with a cup of tea was a point of pride. An empty tin was a small shame. A full one cost pennies in ingredients and signaled a house that was properly kept. We buy packets of biscuits now for £2 that last 3 days. Her homemade shortbread cost 4p and lasted the week. Number 22. The bread bin ritual. Bread was kept in a wooden or enamel bread bin, never in a plastic bag, and never in the fridge. Your grandmother knew that a proper bread bin allowed just enough air circulation to keep the crust firm without drying out the crumb. A loaf would last 4 days in a good bread bin. In a plastic bag, it sweated and went moldy in 2. She also knew to store bread cut side down, pressing the exposed crumb against the board. to slow starling. Stale bread was never thrown away. It became bread and butter pudding, breadcrumbs for coating fish, or croutons for soup. The bread bin was the first line of defense against waste. When plastic bags and sliced bread became standard, the bread bin disappeared. Bread started going moldy faster, and we started throwing more of it away. Number 21. Making friends with the butcher. Your grandmother did not pick up a shrink-wrapped tray of anonymous meat from a refrigerated shelf. She stood at the butcher's counter and asked for exactly what she needed. A pound of shin for stewing, 2 lamb chops, not too thick, a marrow bone for stock. The butcher knew her by name, knew her family, knew her budget. He would set aside the cheaper cuts he knew she preferred. He would throw in a bone for the dog without being asked. That personal connection meant she always got the best value and never bought more than she needed. Supermarkets destroyed this relationship entirely and replaced it with nothing. Number 20. Rendering and saving dripping. Every spoonful of fat was saved. Bacon fat went into a jar by the stove for frying eggs. Beef dripping from the Sunday roast was strained through muslin into a ceramic pot for roast potatoes and Yorkshire pudding. Goose fat at Christmas was treated like liquid gold. Your grandmother never bought cooking oil. She had no need. The fat from one meal became the cooking medium for the next. A single roast produced enough dripping to last a fortnight. The dripping jar sat on the back of the stove or on the larder shelf, always available, always free. When the health scares of the 1970s turned animal fat into a villain, families threw away their dripping jars and started buying vegetable oil and margarine. We now know those replacements were often worse. The dripping jar was not just thrifty, it was healthier than what replaced it. Number 19. The Monday wash day meal. Monday was wash day. Your grandmother spent the entire morning boiling, scrubbing, mangling, and hanging laundry. She had no time to cook, so Monday's meal was always planned to need no attention. Cold meat from Sunday's roast, with pickles and bread. Bubble and squeak, fried quickly in dripping. Soup from the stockpot. The meal was pre-decided, pre-prepared, and took 5 minutes to put on the table. This was not laziness. It was logistics. She matched her cooking schedule to her work schedule with military precision. Every day had its rhythm, and meals fitted around chores, not the other way round. We spent hours deciding what to eat each night. She never spent a single minute on that question. Number 18. Storing root vegetables in sand. Carrots, parsnips, beetroot, and turnips were stored in wooden boxes filled with damp sand in the outhouse or cellar. Layered carefully so they did not touch, the roots stayed firm and fresh for months through winter. No refrigeration was needed. The sand maintained the right humidity and kept the vegetables from drying out or sprouting. A single box could hold enough carrots to last from October to March. Your grandmother would pull out what she needed each day, brush off the sand, and they were as crisp as the day they were dug. This habit stretched back centuries, and it cost nothing. When fridges became standard and supermarkets offered year-round imports, the sandbox disappeared. We now buy carrots in plastic bags, watch them go limp in the fridge after a week, and throw them away. She kept hers perfect for 5 months. Number 17. Keeping a price book. Some housewives kept a small notebook, recording the price of every staple item at every local shop. Butter at the co-op, 3 and 6. Butter at the corner shop, 3 and 9. Sugar at the market, 2p cheaper on Saturdays. This price book told her exactly where to buy each item for the best value. She did not need a price comparison app. She had a pencil and discipline. Over a year, the savings were significant, enough to pay for Christmas presents or a new winter coat for the youngest. The price book also tracked seasonal fluctuations. She knew when eggs were cheapest, when fruit was in glut, when the fishmonger dropped prices on Friday afternoon. That knowledge was power. It meant her pantry was always stocked at the lowest possible cost. Number 16. Egg preservation in water glass. When hens laid heavily in spring and summer, your grandmother preserved the surplus in water glass, a solution of sodium silicate and water kept in a large stoneware crock. Fresh eggs were lowered gently into the solution, where the water glass sealed the porous shells and prevented air from entering. Those eggs stayed perfectly edible for 6 months or more without refrigeration. By autumn, when the hens slowed their laying, the preserved eggs kept the household supplied through winter. A tin of water glass cost about 9 pence and preserved dozens of eggs. The habit disappeared when battery farming made eggs cheap and available year-round. But for anyone keeping their own hens today, water glass preservation works exactly as well as it did 70 years ago. Number 15. The Friday fish habit. Friday was fish day, not for religious reasons in most households, but because the fishmonger got his freshest delivery on Friday morning, and prices were lowest when supply was highest. Your grandmother timed her purchase to get the best value on the freshest catch. She knew which fish were cheap in which months: herring in autumn, mackerel in summer, and cod in winter. This seasonal awareness meant she never overpaid. The Friday habit also gave the week structure. Everyone knew what was for tea. No discussion needed. When frozen fish fingers arrived in the 1960s, they replaced the fishmonger's counter. Convenience won, and flavor and value were lost. Number 14. Buying from the reduced shelf at closing time. Your grandmother knew that bakers, greengrocers, and market stallholders dropped their prices in the last hour before closing. Bread baked that morning went for half price at 5 o'clock. Fruit and vegetables that would not last another day were practically given away. She would time a late afternoon visit specifically to catch these bargains, filling her basket with perfectly good food at a fraction of the daytime price. This was not considered embarrassing. It was considered sensible. The reduced items went straight into that evening's meal, or were preserved, pickled, or baked into something that would keep. Nothing bought at a discount was ever wasted. She stretched every penny twice. Supermarkets still do reduced sections, but the habit of planning around them, of building meals from what is cheap today rather than what a recipe demands, has largely died. Your grandmother fed a family on what the modern shopper walks straight past. Number 13. Keeping a sourdough starter. Long before sourdough became fashionable in hipster bakeries, your grandmother kept a starter in a jar on the larder shelf. She fed it with flour and water, used a portion each week for bread, and kept the rest alive indefinitely. Some starters were passed between families for generations. The bread it produced was tangy, long-lasting, and cost almost nothing. A sourdough loaf stayed fresh far longer than yeast bread, sometimes a full week without going stale. The starter replaced commercial yeast entirely. It was self-sustaining, endlessly renewable, and free. When cheap sliced bread flooded the market in the 1960s, home baking declined, and starters were thrown away. Decades of living culture were poured down the sink in favor of a plastic-wrapped Hovis. Number 12. The pantry inventory check. Every Sunday evening, your grandmother opened the pantry door, looked at every shelf, and made her shopping list based on what was actually needed. Not what she fancied, not what was on offer, what was needed. She checked the flour level, counted the tins, noted which jars were getting low, and planned the week's meals around what she already had. The shopping list filled gaps. It did not start from scratch. This simple habit prevented overbuying, reduced waste, and kept spending predictable. She never came home with 3 bags of pasta when 2 were already in the cupboard. The pantry check took 10 minutes, and saved hours of wandering supermarket aisles buying things on impulse. Blackberry and apple jam cost nothing but time. Your grandmother took the children out with baskets in September, walked the hedgerows, and came home with pounds of free blackberries, mixed with windfall apples from the garden, sugar, and a squeeze of lemon. The fruit became jars of jam that lasted until spring. The kitchen would steam with the sweet, purple smell of boiling fruit. A morning's foraging produced enough jam for months. The Women's Institute judged entries by clarity, set, and flavor, turning a survival skill into a competitive art. Blackberries still grow free in every hedgerow in Britain. Yet we buy jam for £2.50, made with fruit from Poland and packed with additives. Number 10. The envelope budgeting system. On payday, your grandmother divided the household money into labeled envelopes: rent, coal, food, insurance, clothing. The food envelope held exactly what was available for the week, and when it was empty, it was empty. No credit cards, no overdrafts. This enforced discipline meant she never overspent on food. She knew to the penny what each meal could cost and planned accordingly. The envelope system made invisible spending impossible. Every purchase was a conscious decision weighed against what remained. Luxuries only appeared when essentials were covered. This habit kept pantries stocked within means, month after month, year after year. We replaced it with contactless payment and lost all sense of what we actually spend on food. Number 9. Keeping a vinegar jar. A large jar of malt vinegar sat in every pantry. It was used for far more than chips. Vinegar cleaned windows, descaled kettles, revived wilted lettuce, pickled onions, preserved beetroot, and made salad dressing. Mixed with brown sugar, it became a glaze for ham. Added to poaching water, it kept eggs from spreading. A splash in the washing up water cut grease. A single large bottle costing a few pence served dozens of purposes. Your grandmother did not buy separate products for each of these jobs. She had vinegar. It was the original multi-purpose household product, cheaper and more effective than most of what fills the cleaning aisle at Tesco today. Number 8. Batch cooking on Sunday. Sunday was not just roast dinner. It was the day your grandmother cooked ahead for the week. While the roast was in the oven, she would simmer a pan of soup for Monday, prepare a pie filling for Wednesday, and bake a pudding for Thursday. The oven was already hot. The kitchen was already warm. She used every minute and every degree of heat. By Sunday evening, half the week's meals were done or partially prepared. This eliminated the nightly scramble to decide what to eat. It reduced fuel costs. It meant meals appeared on the table at the same time every day without drama. We heat the oven for a single meal now. She would have considered that criminal waste. Number 7. Saving and reusing paper bags. Brown paper bags from the grocer, the baker, and the market were folded flat and stored in a drawer. They were reused for packed lunches, for storing vegetables, for wrapping cheese, and for lining cake tins. Nothing was single use. A paper bag had 3 or 4 lives before it was finally used to light the fire. This tiny habit, barely worth mentioning on its own, was part of a broader philosophy. Everything had value. Everything could be used again. The idea of throwing away a perfectly good bag after one use would have seemed wasteful to the point of madness. Number 6. The weekly meal plan pinned to the wall. A piece of paper tacked to the inside of a kitchen cupboard door listed every meal for the week. Monday, cold meat and bubble and squeak. Tuesday, liver and onions. Wednesday, shepherd's pie. Thursday, fish. Friday, faggots and chips. Saturday, sausages. Sunday, roast. Everyone knew what was coming. No arguments, no last-minute decisions, no wasted ingredients bought for meals that never happened. The meal plan drove the shopping list. The shopping list drove the spending. The spending stayed within the envelope. It was a chain of discipline that started with a pencil and a scrap of paper. Possibly the most powerful tool on this entire list. Number 5. Keeping a cold slab in the larder. Before refrigerators, the marble or slate cold slab was the heart of the larder. Butter, cheese, milk, and meat sat on that stone surface, which stayed cool even in summer. The slab was positioned against an outside wall, often with a ventilated grill to allow cool air circulation. Muslin covers kept flies away. Your grandmother checked the larder twice daily, moving items that needed using first to the front. The cold slab kept dairy fresh for days without electricity. Cheese wrapped in muslin on a cold slab develops better flavor than cheese suffocating in cling film in a fridge. The larder was a carefully managed ecosystem, and the cold slab was its foundation. Number 4. Never go shopping hungry. Your grandmother ate before she went to the shops, always. A cup of tea and a slice of toast at minimum. She knew that hunger made you buy things you did not need. This was not something she read in a magazine. It was common sense passed between women at the market. Go hungry, and you come home with twice what you planned. The rule was absolute. A full stomach and a written list meant she bought exactly what was needed, and nothing more. Psychologists have since studied this. Nutritionists recommend it. But your grandmother did not need a study. She had her mother's voice in her ear and a food envelope that would not stretch to cover impulse purchases. Number 3. Swapping and sharing with neighbors. If Mrs. Henderson's apple tree produced a glut, she brought a bag round. Your grandmother returned the favor with a pot of jam or a dozen eggs when the hens were laying well. This informal exchange network meant that surpluses were never wasted, and shortages were covered without spending money. A neighbor with a plum tree supplied the street. Someone with a good recipe shared it freely. This was not charity. It was community economics. Everyone contributed. Everyone benefited. The habit kept pantries varied and interesting without costing a penny. It also kept people connected in a way that online shopping and delivery vans never will. One shelf in every pantry was reserved for emergencies. Tinned meat, tinned fish, tinned fruit, tinned milk, dried soup. These were not for everyday use. They were insurance. If money ran short before payday, if snow blocked the roads, if illness kept you in bed. That shelf meant the family would still eat. Your grandmother checked it monthly and replaced anything she used. The emergency shelf was a lesson learned during wartime, when supply chains could break overnight. It was the physical embodiment of the phrase, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We have forgotten this habit entirely. Most families today would struggle to feed themselves for 3 days if the shops suddenly closed. Your grandmother could manage a fortnight without blinking. Number 1. Teaching the next generation. The most important habit of all was not about food. It was about knowledge. Your grandmother taught her daughters everything. How to make pastry, how to judge a piece of meat, how to stretch a meal, how to preserve fruit, how to budget, how to plan, and how to waste nothing. She stood them at the kitchen counter from the age of 5, gave them jobs, corrected their mistakes, and passed on skills that had been handed down for generations. That chain of knowledge kept pantries full for centuries. When we stopped teaching our children to cook, to plan, to manage a household, we broke the chain. And no supermarket loyalty card will ever replace what was lost. Those are the 30 habits that kept British pantries stocked through wars, winters, and hard times. Try one this week. Just one. The meal plan, the stockpot, the pantry check. See if it changes how you shop and how you eat. Then come back and tell me which one your grandmother swore by. I want to hear it, because these habits were not old-fashioned. They were brilliant, and we forgot them all.